Who's to blame for this loss?
Well, you know what? You have to look at the Philadelphia Eagles, and I don't think you sit and point a finger at one particular person. There were miscues by Carson Wentz, missing Nelson Aguilar, who was wide open, for probably would have been a walk-in touchdown. He also missed another touchdown when he was blitzed from the outside by the backer, and he also missed Clement that was wide open, probably would have walked in the end zone. But I think I looked at this in particular, this game, as a trap game. Because when you look at this particular game and the next 3 games going forward, you have the LA Rams the next week, and then you have to play the New York Giants. Even though that the New York Giants right now is probably in disarray, it's still a rival, and it's still one that for both teams that they both get fired up for. Both fans definitely get fired up for as well. But I looked at the Seattle game, and I was a little worried going in, not because I didn't think that the Philadelphia Eagles would be able to beat the Seattle Seahawks. One, because Russell Wilson, an MVP candidate, and one that I think we should talk about a little bit more, and it's not always about stats, it's the way that he carries his team each and every year, but we want to pinpoint everybody else that continues to rise by their name and not by their quarterback leading them to the playoffs and also to the Super Bowl. But it was more or less going into Seattle, what was going to happen next week versus the LA Rams. Everyone was going to talk about Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, Sean McVay, Doug Peterson. It was going to be a big story, and I thought that there was going to be a letdown. Everything that I've seen in that game, look at defensively, they weren't able to stop the offense of the Seattle Seahawks on third down. There were too many penalties in the secondary, too many holding calls. Up front, Russell Wilson seemed that he had his way by buying time for his receivers to get open. And defensively, we need to talk a little bit more about not only Russell Wilson, but the defense of the Seattle Seahawks. Listen, Bobby Wagner and also their linebacking core, listen, they are probably the best duo, if not front 7 in the game. Forget about the secondary. I mean, we all knew Maxwell probably was going to give up a few touchdowns. He's done it so many times. Came to Philadelphia, it didn't work out. And they're missing the Legion of Boom. But their front 7 is dominant. So when I look at this game, I can't pinpoint, I don't want to point anyone out. It was more or less, let's give credit to the Seattle Seahawks by the way they're playing, and they always seem to turn it on at this particular time of the season.
Go ahead, Max.
Look, if you're looking, the answer is Russell Wilson, in fact, Donovan, you're right. And we're going to get into Russell Wilson in a second. And it's about time people recognize, those who haven't, who've been slow to recognize. Russell Wilson is what happened to him, but I'm going to table that. On the Philadelphia Eagles, the person to blame is Doug Peterson. Now, you're right, Donovan. It's no one guy to blame, right? And as much as you blame Peterson for this loss, you got to credit him for 9 straight wins. No team wins every game. You won 9 in a row. You know what kind of game you lose? To a good team on the road in a hostile environment and an MVP caliber quarterback with a ferocious front 7, right? Like, that's the kind of game you might lose. And it's not even a divisional rivalry or anything. That's the kind of game you might lose. So I'll give Peterson a lot of credit for Wentz's development, for the way this team has played, but you got to give him some blame for last night. You have to. Look, the refs were not friendly to the Eagles. They were very friendly, it seemed to me, to the defensive backs of Seattle. But really, Peterson, first wasting that challenge on a stupid challenge in the first half, but then especially second half. It's third quarter, in fact. It's a one-score game. It's obviously, on replay, you can see clearly it's a forward lateral, and he doesn't challenge, and that could have easily decided the game. Yes, Wentz got stripped in the end zone. I thought, but look, guy made a play. What are you going to do? You got a great defensive player makes a play on you. It can happen. You can get stripped jumping into the end zone. And that changed things. Wentz also did amazing things like no one else but Aaron Rodgers or maybe Russell Wilson could do. If you're looking to blame one person, I think this one is on Doug Peterson, especially for not challenging that forward lateral. That shifted the momentum of the game.
Well, I'm not going to blame one person. I'm going to blame a bunch of people. And it's a bunch of people on Seattle's defense because I think they were the difference in this game. Let's keep in mind the score is 24-10. This is an Eagles offense that hasn't scored less than 20 points all year long until last night. You've got, what was it, Dewey McDonald and Justin Coleman in your secondary along with Byron Maxwell. Excuse me, you still did a damn good job against that Eagles offense. Now, Nelson Aguilar had a big-time game, and, Donovan's right in terms of Carson Wentz, missing him on a couple of occasions. Still had 7 receptions for about 141 yards. I didn't see the Eagles running the football as effectively as they did throughout this season. I didn't see Carson Wentz passing the football as effectively as he has throughout the season. The numbers may tell us otherwise because he had a couple of big plays, but the reality is that when it was time to shut things down, the kind of defense that you saw from Seattle was reminiscent of Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman being in that lineup. They weren't last night. And instead, what do you have? You got a guy by the name of Frank Clark that had 2 sacks. You got Sheldon Richardson with Michael Bennett on that defensive line. You've got Bobby Wagner in your linebacker spot with KJ Wright. We forgot about those two and what they can bring to the table. And you still have Earl Thomas at your free safety in the secondary helping things out and being the hit man that he is. The fact is that you look at the Eagles, what you normally saw from them throughout this year, we had question marks as to whether or not they'd be able to do it in Seattle, which was one of the reasons we were looking so forward to this game. We said that Seattle's defense had been suspect from time to time. They're top 10 overall and they're top 10 in yards allowed. And last night, they reminded the Eagles and the rest of us why that is the case. Bobby Wagner said it best. People keep sleeping on us. We got some Rough Riders on this crew, even without Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor in the lineup.
Yeah, the front
and they
seven
showed me that
stepped
last
up.
night.